Sirens unspooled along Hilliard Avenue in thin ribbons of red and blue, and Cedar Ridge Apartments seemed to pull its shoulders up against the evening. On the third floor, a single bulb jittered in its metal cage, making a nervous halo. The hallway walls were painted the color of old oatmeal. The scuffs on them read like a calendar no one bothered to flip. The door to 3B. Travis Reed's door held still as a jaw clenched against a secret. Nora Alvarez waited by the stairwell with one palm braced to the cool rail, a paper handkerchief pressed to her mouth. She had told herself a dozen times that she would not imagine the worst. She had also learned in the quiet years since grief made her its student that the body knows before the mind agrees. The air had changed days ago, then hours ago then. Here and now, a sourness that wasn't only rot, but the iron taste of time gone wrong. Officer Jordan Blake reached the landing, first calm distilled into motion. Officer Karen Singh came after, steady and deliberate, a borrowed ring of keys from Superintendent Howard Beck, clicking like small bones in his hand. They tried the master. The deadbolt declined. Procedure lined up a shoulder to the frame, the breaching tool set like punctuation at the end of a sentence no one wanted to read aloud. Wood surrendered on a sigh. The door exhaled. Something stale and metallic rolled past them, not a gust so much as a confession. Singh angled the flashlight into 3B. The beam found a narrow kitchen with a plate still patient on the counter, the chalk of dust on the blinds, a chair resting on its side as though it had stopped mid-thought. Light drifted over a small pair of sneakers asleep by the mat, laces dulled with hallway grit. Nora didn't cross the threshold. She took one careful step forward and stopped a hand to the doorframe the way one might steady themselves at a gravestone. In the pocket of her cardigan lay a folded drawing of a cat with legs too long and a tail too hopeful. She had kept it without knowing why. The why now pressed forward from the dim. Inside the apartment listened to itself. The refrigerator hummed a frayed note, the kind a throat makes when it has cried too long. A thermostat ticked. From another unit, a radio murmured the chorus of a song cut thin by drywall. The officers moved with a reverence reserved for places where something had once been whole. Pencil marks low on the wall began at the kitchen doorway and continued like a cautious path toward the living room. Short vertical lines, each the height of a small hand, spaced as if someone had measured the length of days with a dull point. 10, 15, 20. Then a seam where the pencil broke or patience did. In the bedroom, the flashlight grazed a mattress on the floor, a heap of cushions shaped into a small hill, and on that hill a plastic spoon lay face down like a pale crescent. Singh's breath paused, then continued. He did not touch the spoon. Some objects prefer to be believed rather than handled. Blake knelt, lowering himself until his eyes shared the room's level. The table in the living room made a clean rectangle of shadow. Beneath it, darkness had the shape of a child trying to be smaller than the world. Blake let the beam retreat a few inches so it wouldn't sting. Silence is a language. He spoke it now. The room, grateful, answered. Hand emerged, first fingers like reed's knuckles mapped by graphite and grit. The hand clutched a rusted tin can as if it were an anchor. The light climbed over a wrist, a forearm, thin but articulate with muscle born of waiting, and then up to a face. Eyes open. The expression wasn't fear. It wasn't welcome. It was the discipline of invisibility learned the hard way. Nora saw only the officer's posture change. Shoulders softened, elbows tucked. A perimeter of gentleness formed in the air. Her body recognized the choreography of rescue before a single word moved through it. She stood very still and listened as if quiet might give the child permission to breathe without asking. Blake opened the thermal blanket with one hand, not offering it so much as making space for it to exist. A draft slipped around his sleeve, took a tour of the table legs, and lifted a strand of dust from the floor. In that draft, the apartment remembered itself pancakes on a Sunday. A woman humming, while a curtain breathed a postcard addressed in block letters to my boy pinned to a refrigerator with a chip clip shaped like a strawberry. Memory, like dust, rises even when you don't want it to. The child blinked. It was not a plea. It was surveillance checking whether the world had finally changed its mind. The tin can rolled half an inch and made a small apologetic sound like something metal far away striking something else metal and deciding not to try again. Singh adjusted the beam until it made a soft path between the table's edge and the open blanket, a strip of light the width of a choice. Nora kept thinking of doors. The one now open. The one across the hall from her own closed for weeks, while a smell threaded the corridor like a rumor. The doorstep where she had once found that cat drawing placed like an offering by small hands. The door to her past, which she had learned not to ask to reopen. She steadied herself and counted her breaths 4 into the handkerchief, 4 out. She had done what she could. She had knocked. Sometimes knocking is the bravest thing. Down the corridor the bulb flickered again, but the hallway no longer felt abandoned. A fact had entered it, and facts, unlike rumors, take up rightful space. Outside, the light rain doing its quiet work on Ohio roofs translated into a soft staccato on the building's aluminum gutters. Inside, time returned to the shape of minutes instead of months. This is the kind of moment where a story asks for witnesses, yours, mine, anyone who will lean toward the quiet instead of away. If you believe that noticing matters, that listening can move a hand toward a latch, stay with this narration. Subscribe not to a channel so much as to a promise that the next silent hallway won't be left to make its own plea. Protocol followed itself unspooling in measured order. Words on radios were careful and approximate. A medical team ghosted up the stairs, their shoes whispering on the industrial carpet. Blake didn't rush the space between table and blanket. He built a bridge out of patience and set it down a plank at a time. Singh matched his cadence. The child's breath sounded like paper turning in a library at night. In the bedroom, the little hill of cushions kept its angle and the spoon kept its moon. Beneath that floor, the wood rang hollow under the lightest touch like a drum with hands hovering just above the skin. A shape of absence lived there, and absence, too, demands to be honored. Noah Reed would be a name later. For now, he was a pair of eyes in a kind of dusk, a geography of ribs, a fist loosening around a poor man's relic, the tin can that had once held something and then only held the holding. He wasn't hiding so much as upholding a treaty with fear. I will be smaller than you until someone larger than both of us arrives. Nora's hand left the doorframe. She didn't know what she meant to do, only that the small world of the table looked like the entire world until a larger one widened around it. A paramedic knelt beside Blake, her movements tender, as if she were speaking to a skittish animal without speaking at all. The blanket edged forward the width of a leaf. A siren faded in the near distance. The building sighed again. A neighbor's television reset its volume. A child on another floor laughed at a cartoon. These details stitched themselves to the present proof that time had not entirely broken. The flashlight dimmed a notch when Singh eased his wrist to lessen the glare. In that softened circle the boy blinked again, and then the space between blink and breath shortened by a heartbeat. Very small, very real. The apartment which had performed stillness for so long accepted the new choreography. In the doorway, Nora closed her eyes and opened them. She had seen many beginnings disguised as endings, and many endings dressed as doors. This, she understood, was both. Outside, daylight stood behind a bank of cloud, undecided. Inside, the lip of the blanket brushed against a knee, and nothing terrible happened. The boy did not speak. He did not cry. He was not required to. But in the smallest of movements, the kind only a room learns to read, he allowed the world to move 3 inches closer, and the door, which had finally breathed, stayed open. There was a time when apartment 3B was a warm place, a pocket of ordinary magic tucked inside the worn brick of Cedar Ridge. The walls, though chipped, had witnessed laughter that came freely. The smell back then wasn't sour metal or dust, it was maple syrup pancakes on Sunday mornings, and Emily Reed humming while she flipped them on a cast-iron skillet. Emily was a small woman with wide, eager eyes and a voice soft enough to comfort frightened children at Willow Creek Preschool where she taught. She painted stories into the air while reading to her class, and she brought that same light home each night. Her dream was never grand, a safe space, a boy who knew he was loved, and a man who came home safe from the road. Travis Reed had been that man once. A long-haul trucker, he knew highways the way poets know words. He sent postcards from every state he passed through. They always began the same, "To my boy," and ended with doodles of trucks or little sons with faces. Emily would pin each card to the refrigerator with a chip clip shaped like a strawberry, creating a collage of places they'd never been but felt connected to. Noah, barely 5 at the time, would run to the mailbox every Wednesday and wait small shoes squeaking on the tiled floor of the lobby. His world was simple, Mommy in the kitchen, Daddy on the road, and love stretched like string between them. In those days, the apartment doors seemed to open easily. Neighbors waved. Nora Alvarez across the hall would sometimes bring over banana bread. Emily always sent her home with a paper plate of pancakes in return. The morning, everything shattered, was unremarkable at first glance. A drizzle misted the Ohio streets, softening the edges of the world. Noah had been feverish the night before, so Emily decided to drive alone, just a quick errand before work. She kissed Noah's forehead, promised pancakes later, and disappeared behind the door. 2 hours later, sirens replaced the drizzle. At the intersection of Fairview and 9th, a truck had run a red light. Emily's car never made it through the crossing. Witnesses said it happened fast. A burst of sound, a rain of glass, then silence heavy enough to choke on. Travis wasn't there to see it. He was hundreds of miles away, somewhere in Indiana, staring at a sunset in his side mirror. The call reached him in a gas station parking lot, the kind that sells stale coffee and cold sandwiches under buzzing fluorescent lights. The world did not spin slower or faster. It simply broke in half. The first week after Emily's death, Travis moved like a man underwater. People came and went, relatives, neighbors, the kind woman from Willow Creek who had worked beside Emily Ava Harper. She came with casseroles, with soft words, with attempts at comfort that dissolved against Travis's silence. Noah didn't understand where his mother had gone. He sat on the couch with his coloring books drawing wide yellow suns and stick figures. Sometimes he would look up and ask, "When's Mommy coming back?" and the room would hold its breath. Travis didn't answer. He didn't know how. At first, he tried. He stayed off the road, picked Noah up from preschool, made simple dinners, macaroni from a box, canned soup. But every corner of the apartment echoed with Emily's absence. The kitchen without her song felt like a mouth without teeth. The postcards on the fridge became a cruel gallery of things undone. Bills piled up. Grief mutated into anger, then into the numbness of whiskey. Travis told himself each night that tomorrow he would get clean, go back to work, make his boy proud. Each morning the weight was heavier. When the trucking company called to remind him about a drug test, he didn't answer. His rig was eventually reassigned to someone else. He sold off what he could, Emily's reading lamp, the coffee table, later even the couch. Ava visited again, bringing Noah a small toy truck and an invitation to come play with her nieces. Travis opened the door just wide enough to take the toy, muttered thanks, and closed it before she could step inside. Ava stared at the peeling paint and whispered to herself, "Please, just let me help." Inside, Travis sat on the floor with his head in his hands. Noah, confused but patient, sat beside him, rolling the little truck back and forth across the boards. He had learned to keep his questions quiet. As weeks turned into months, the postcards stopped coming. The refrigerator was bare, not just of food, but of proof that love had traveled here once. Noah began drawing more. The pictures changed, first bright suns and smiling faces, then darker lines, figures fading at the edges. Emily remained vibrant in his sketches, always centered, always holding his hand. Travis appeared smaller further away until one day he disappeared from the page entirely. Then came the night Travis left. He sat alone at the table long after Noah had curled under a thin blanket on the floor. In his hand was Emily's photograph, the one taken at the county fair where she wore a paper crown and laughed at the camera. On the table lay a postcard he had never mailed blank except for the words, "To my boy." Outside the window, rain fell like memory. Travis rose slowly like a man carrying chains. He put on his jacket, slipped the photo into his pocket, and stood before Noah's sleeping form. His lips moved, but no sound came out. At the door, he hesitated. Behind him was everything broken. Ahead, nothing certain. His fingers tightened around the knob. Once. Twice. He left without a word. The door closed, and in the space where sound should have been, a new kind of silence began. When Travis closed the door that night, silence settled into apartment 3B like a permanent tenant. It didn't arrive all at once. At first, it sounded almost ordinary, just the hum of the refrigerator and the small, steady breaths of a child asleep under a thin blanket. Noah stirred once, half opening his eyes, expecting to see his father's boots near the threshold, the worn flannel shirt draped over the chair, but there was nothing there except shadows. On the first morning, Noah thought his father had gone to the corner store. He waited by the door, his knees tucked to his chest, listening for the rattle of keys, the uneven rhythm of Travis's heavy boots. The hours stretched like rubber bands. When hunger whispered, he opened the cabinet and found a half-empty box of crackers and a dusty jar of peanut butter. He ate carefully, saving most for later because he believed there would be more soon. By the second day, Noah's routine became a ritual. He checked the window every hour, dragging a chair to climb up and peek through the blinds. He searched for the familiar shape of his father's blue jacket among the passing strangers. Nothing. The street went on living, unaware of the small boy scanning it for proof of return. The water stopped on day 3. Noah twisted the faucet and heard only a metallic cough from the pipes. The toilet tank still held a few inches of water. He scooped it into a cup and rationed it between himself and Whiskers, the scrappy gray cat who had once been Emily's birthday gift. Whiskers had become Noah's confidant. When the dark pressed too close, he whispered to her, and in return she purred like a small engine, a reminder that he wasn't entirely alone. They slept curled together on the same blanket, two fragile creatures against the cold. By the 5th day, Noah realized he needed to mark time before it disappeared entirely. He found a broken pencil under the couch and began scratching short vertical lines along the baseboard near his mattress. One for each day, whispered like a secret. The pencil dulled, so he used a fork to continue the etchings. 20, 30, 50. The wall became a calendar no one else would ever see. Food dwindled. The crackers went stale, the peanut butter jar scraped dry. Whiskers began losing weight, her fur clumping in patches. Noah scoured the kitchen for anything edible, stale cereal, the last granola bar hidden behind an empty box, crumbs swept from the floor. When the rain came, he placed bowls beneath the leaks in the ceiling to collect water. He moved quietly, almost like a ghost. The apartment became its own strange world, with rules only he understood. Daylight hurt his eyes, so he kept the blinds closed. At night, he sat under the table with Whiskers, whispering stories Emily once told him about rocket ships and faraway stars. Sometimes he imagined that if he stayed very still, he could hear his mother's voice again, humming that soft tune she used to sing while folding laundry. The melody would drift in and out like a memory, comforting and cruel at the same time. When Whiskers stopped eating, Noah tried everything. Soft words, gentle, nudges pushing the food dish closer. On the morning she didn't move at all, he wrapped her tiny body in Travis's old red flannel shirt. There was no garden, no dirt to dig, only the warped floorboards. Using the spoon he had saved for rainy days, he scraped at a soft patch of wood near the closet until it gave way. It took hours. His fingers blistered, nails splitting. But at last he made a hollow just deep enough. He placed Whiskers inside, adding little treasures on top, a button, a bottle cap, a piece of string offerings only a child would think to give. The spoon he laid across the mound like a marker, a moon-shaped memorial for his only friend. Afterward, he closed the closet door and never opened it again. Days melted together. The pencil marks blurred until Noah wasn't sure how many there were anymore. He stopped whispering even to himself. Hunger became a dull companion rather than an enemy. He would sip from the rainwater bowl, chew a crust of bread if any remained, and sit still for hours watching the shapes of shadows crawl across the walls. Outside, life continued. Neighbors passed in the hallway, their voices muffled. TVs blared commercials. Someone laughed too loud near the stairwell. No one knocked on 3B. Nora Alvarez still checked the door some nights, pressing her ear to the peeling paint, but fear kept her from pushing harder. She smelled something odd like spoiled milk, but told herself the trash chute was to blame. The world makes excuses because excuses are easier than action. One evening, when Noah had nearly drifted into sleep beneath the table, a sound jolted him awake. It wasn't the normal creaks or hums of the apartment's tired bones. This was sharper, like the scrape of furniture being dragged across the floor. His heart hammered. He held his breath and listened. Another sound followed, softer, slower, as though something had shifted its weight just beyond the bedroom door. Then, silence, heavy and absolute. Noah crawled deeper under the table, clutching the tin can he'd kept beside him for comfort. He wanted to call out, but his throat locked tight. He stayed there until morning, wide-eyed and still unsure whether the noise had been real or born of hunger and fear. When the first pale light slipped under the blinds, Noah finally exhaled. But the memory of that sound clung to the air like a shadow that refused to leave. The spoon remained in the closet, unmoving. The pencil marks on the wall waited, and the door to 3B stayed closed, guarding secrets no one yet dared to confront. The calendar in the lobby kept turning even when no one looked at it. February curled into March, and March staggered toward a spring. The radiators in Cedar Ridge clanked less as the cold retreated, but the third-floor hallway seemed to grow colder anyway, as if it had learned a new definition of winter and intended to keep it. Nora Alvarez counted time by smells. At first, the sour note near 3B could be explained trash chute a neighbor's forgotten leftovers, a mop left wet too long. Then the smell changed. It thickened, gathered a metallic edge, clung to her scarf, followed her down the stairs. She began to take the long way around the landing, holding her breath like a swimmer, then exhaling only when she reached the mailboxes. She left small signs for herself like breadcrumbs, a sticky note on her fridge. Call Howard about 3B. And later, a second one, call again. Howard Beck, superintendent of the ordinary and the avoidable, promised he would look into it, his voice tired, his coffee cold, his to-do list longer than his hallway. Time performed its usual trick. It passed. In the city beyond, snowmelt darkened the gutters and the sidewalks remembered how to be sidewalks. People went to work. Spring jackets appeared. A radio in a laundromat sang that everything would be all right. Inside apartment 3B, silence rehearsed a different chorus and perfected it. A mile away, in an office with humming fluorescent lights and walls the color of modest intentions, Dana Whitaker put another folder on top of a stack that leaned like a tired shoulder. She had learned the logistics of compassion forms, checklists, directives, lines for signatures that might never be written. Her inbox renewed itself hourly, a tide she could not turn back. Somewhere beneath a memo about budget freezes sat a flagged, anonymous call from last year concern about a small boy with drawn thin, wearing the same clothes closed as unsubstantiated when no one answered the door. Dana turned that page over more than once like a stone whose shape kept changing. She had learned, too, the vocabulary of triage and its accompanying ghosts. When her supervisor reminded the team in a meeting that longer investigations reduce key metrics, the room practiced silence as a professional skill. Dana stared at a paper cup of coffee and imagined doors. The problem with doors was not that they closed. It was how easily they taught the world to stop knocking. Elsewhere, in a quiet kitchen that had once held another kind of laughter, Ava Harper took a cooled loaf of banana bread from the oven and set it on a rack. The smell filled her small place on Taylor Street sweet and insistent. She baked on days when memory needed somewhere to sit. Emily had taught her the recipe years ago, singing under her breath while a toddler beat a wooden spoon against a metal bowl. To my boy, Travis used to write on postcards then. The cards had stopped. The spoon had gone quiet. Ava washed the mixing bowl slowly, as if the way she moved could change the past's posture. She saw Nora, by chance that week, each woman halfway between errands. They recognized one another with the tentative warmth of neighbors who had shared food and condolences but not enough sentences. Nora mentioned the smell without calling it by its true name. Ava felt something in her ribs pull tight. She had knocked on that door, once been met by a sliver of Travis's face, and the word thanks turned into a barrier. She had not knocked again. The city had its own rhythm sirens for other reasons, buses on schedule pigeons finding their way to the same windowsills. Inside, 3B pencil scratches kept doing what they were asked to do, count until they couldn't. The plastic spoon kept its moon above the small grave in the closet. A tin can rested under the table, its rim rusting into a darker story. Nora called Howard a third time, then a fourth. She stood outside 3B with her ear to the wood and distinguished between the building's old groans and something else, nothing. It was the kind of silence that learned to be heavy. On the fourth call, Howard came up the stairs winded and already apologizing. He knocked in a rhythm that suggested authority. The door returned a flat echo. He put his key into the master and found resistance where compliance should be. Deadbolt. Inside, or at least once inside. He frowned, said he'd escalate a word that meant more time. Dana's phone rang the same afternoon. An overfull voicemail system sent a digital shrug to her screen. When she finally heard the message, Nora, voice thin with worry that had nowhere left to go, she circled the address with a pen and wrote Cedar Ridge 3B on a yellow pad, then underlined it. A coworker dropped another file onto her desk. The pen line wavered. She imagined outcomes at 30 frames per second. She imagined arriving too late. She stood, sat again, looked at the clock. Hated the clock, left anyway. In the hallway, Nora waited with a paper handkerchief folded into a small, clean square. Ava arrived 5 minutes later without quite realizing she had chosen to come. She had started walking after hanging up, and now her feet had decided the rest. Howard showed up in the slow shuffle of a man whose job required him to be the building's conscience at an hourly rate. He carried a clipboard and a frown he'd used before. They all studied the door as if its paint could offer an explanation. The smell did its work without needing to argue. Even the cheap hallway bulb seemed to pull its light back a notch. Howard knocked again and called Travis Reed by name with a voice that had umpteen evictions in it and 4 apologies. He waited. He tried the master key. The deadbolt's refusal was brighter this time, a sound in the shape of no. He looked at Nora, at Ava, at the air, and then at his phone. He made a call that used words like welfare check and authorized entry. He did not say child. He did not have to. At CPS, Dana had learned to split her day into fractions of possible goodness. She drove to Cedar Ridge with both hands on the wheel and a gravity in her throat. She parked crooked and didn't correct it. The hallway found her walking toward it. The smell met her halfway. For a moment, the world startled her with its clarity, the faint scuff of sneakers somewhere above the hum of a soda machine 2 floors down, the tick of a bulb, cooling Nora's breath, counting itself. Dana introduced herself in the quiet way of people who know their names won't help. She knocked once, twice. The door retained its story. A pause collected between them. Nora, Ava. Dana Howard, like a chorus that knew the last note but not the measure before it. Dana nodded to Howard. The nod meant process. The eyes meant now. If stories like this need anything, it is witnesses who do more than listen. If you believe the small alarms matter smells, silences the way a hallway suddenly feels colder, stay with this story. Subscribe, so the next time a door like this appears, we all recognize what it asks of us. Downstairs, a squad car kissed the curb. Upstairs, air held still, as if the building had decided to be a lung. Howard retrieved the emergency keyring metal clacking against metal in a language of thresholds. He looked older than he had on the phone. He had not meant to become someone who hesitated. None of them had. Nora remembered the drawing she'd saved the cat with legs too long. She felt its soft fold in her cardigan pocket paper worn to a kind of cloth. Ava smelled banana bread on her own sleeves and thought how unfair it is that sweetness lingers when people do not. Dana thought about the memo on her desk and wanted to light it on fire. Officer Jordan Blake and Officer Karen Singh took the stairs 2 at a time without making noise. They arrived as if the hallway had called them by name. Professional quiet is not the same as indifference. Their faces knew the difference. They listened not at the wood, but at what stood behind it. Singh took the ring from Howard and chose without looking. Blake tested the frame with a palm, then with a shoulder. On the other side of the door, the apartment kept its own counsel. A chair still lying on its side, a candle, out of breath pencil ticks at knee height like a forest of days, the plastic spoon keeping its small moon above a secret, a tin can waiting for a hand. Light tried at the edges of the blinds and did not make it through. Nora stepped back and steadied her hand against the railing. Ava folded her arms to keep from reaching for a knob that wasn't hers. Dana placed one palm flat on the door just for a second as if to say, "We are here now." Howard stared at his shoes. Singh set the breaching tool. Blake breathed in out. The hallway gathered itself. The bulb hummed. The building remembered every door it had ever opened and every one it had failed to. Somewhere below, someone laughed at a sitcom. Somewhere above, water traveled a pipe. Here, a line drew itself between before and after. The tool rose. The door at last prepared to breathe. The first strike split the frame like a bone snapping under pressure. The second strike forced the door inward. Wood cracking, paint flaking, a sound so sharp it seemed to cut the air itself. When apartment 3B finally gave way, it did not open like a door should. It sighed, as if reluctant to release what it had been holding for so long. The officers stepped back for a heartbeat before pushing forward, and the smell, heavy, sour, metallic at its edges, rushed out to greet the hallway like a truth no one wanted to face. Nora Alvarez stumbled against the railing, one hand flying to her mouth. Ava Harper turned her face away, tears springing without permission. Dana Whitaker did not move. She had learned the discipline of staying upright even when the world wanted her to bend. Inside, the apartment revealed itself in fragments. Blinds sealed against light dust trembling in the beam of a single flashlight. A chair overturned, one leg splintered. The refrigerator door ajar, its low hum like a throat clearing endlessly. The air was thick damp with weeks of breath that had gone nowhere. Blake and Singh entered like men stepping into a story they already half knew. They moved slowly, gently, careful not to disturb what couldn't yet bear disturbance. Their boots made no sound on the warped floorboards. Then, beneath it all, a smaller sound emerged. Not speech, not a cry. A scrape, soft, deliberate from under the table. Blake froze, flashlight tilting. Singh followed his line of sight. They saw a shadow first, then the fragile outline of something trying very hard not to exist. A boy. He was curled into himself, knees tight against his chest, a tin can clutched in one trembling hand. His hair hung in tangles over a face pale as candle wax. His lips were cracked, his eyes wide but distant, as if they were looking through the room rather than at it. He did not flinch. He did not blink. He simply watched. Time broke open in that moment. The hallway fell away. The smell fell away. All that remained was a child and the fact of him. Blake crouched, lowering himself to the boy's level, his voice reduced to something almost weightless. He didn't speak words. He let his body become a question instead. "May I come closer?" Noah. Reed's eyes shifted once, a flicker of movement like a moth brushing past a candle. That was all. Nora pressed her knuckles to her mouth to keep from sobbing. Ava gripped the edge of the doorway so tightly that her nails left crescents in the wood. Dana's breath caught silent but sharp like paper tearing. The flashlight swept gently across the floor, revealing pencil marks along the baseboards, hundreds of tiny vertical lines etched by a hand that had refused to forget the days. In the bedroom, Singh saw the small hill of cushions stacked in one corner. On top, a plastic spoon rested like a tiny moon over a hidden grave. He didn't need to lift the cushions to understand. The room wasn't empty. It was full of stories that had never been told. A paramedic appeared in the doorway, her expression tightening as her eyes adjusted. She knelt beside Blake, opening a thermal blanket with the kind of care reserved for newborns or relics. She didn't reach for Noah immediately. She let the blanket exist, first an invitation instead of a command. Noah's breathing was shallow, ragged. His fingers clamped tighter around the tin can as if it were the last real thing in a world that had dissolved. Singh scanned the room for signs of another presence, Travis maybe, but there was nothing. No wallet, no bag, no trace of adult life. Just neglect shaped into furniture and shadows. The paramedic murmured something soft and steady, a tone more than language. Slowly, painstakingly, she inched the blanket closer. When the edge brushed Noah's knee, he didn't pull away. That was the only permission she needed. Together, she and Blake lifted him. Noah's limbs dangled like they belonged to someone else. His head fell against Blake's chest hair, hiding his face. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. His silence was louder than any scream could have been. As they carried him past the door, Nora finally let her tears fall. Ava covered her mouth with both hands, her body shaking. Dana stood motionless, watching the boy who had been only a file, maybe a line of text on a report. Flesh and paper were very different weights. Down the stairs they went step by careful step as if Noah might shatter if jostled. Outside, the evening greeted them with flashing lights and a light drizzle. The air was cool, fresh, almost cruel in its contrast to the apartment's heavy rot. The crowd was small, but growing. Neighbors gathered, whispering their faces, a mixture of shock and something harder to name, guilt maybe, or recognition. A reporter's voice floated over the murmurs. Police have confirmed the discovery of a young child. Nora clutched Ava's hand. "This can't be all there is," Nora whispered, her voice breaking. V couldn't answer. She was staring at Noah, at the fragile outline of him against the backdrop of ambulance lights. Dana followed the stretcher to the vehicle. The paramedics worked with brisk precision, checking vitals, starting fluids. Dana wanted to say something, an apology, a vow, but the words turned to dust before they reached her tongue. She watched as the ambulance doors closed, sealing Noah inside a moving box of light. Back in the apartment, Singh knelt by the table. He noticed a folded piece of paper tucked between two floorboards. He eased it free. In a child's shaky handwriting, the words sprawled across the page. "Daddy, I'm still here. I was good. I didn't go outside. I waited." Singh folded the note carefully and slipped it into his vest pocket. Some stories were too heavy to leave behind. Tier. Later, as the vehicles pulled away, Dana turned to Ava and Nora. "This isn't just about one boy," she said softly, almost to herself. "It never is," Ava replied. The rain fell harder, smudging the edges of the streetlights. The crowd thinned, returning to warm homes and evening routines. The hallway upstairs, now empty, seemed to exhale one last breath before retreating into silence again. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe that silence can be broken by action, subscribe so you don't miss the moments when we knock on the doors that no one else will. Because sometimes the difference between life and death is just one person deciding to listen. At St. Augustine Medical Center, Noah lay in a hospital bed, a tangle of wires and gentle machines surrounding him. His eyes remained open but unfocused, like a window facing a storm. A nurse adjusted the IV drip, humming softly in the same absent rhythm Emily once used while folding laundry. The sound did not reach Noah, not yet. Ava stood behind the observation glass, hands pressed to the cool surface. Her reflection merged with Noah's fragile form, making it look as though she were holding him through time and loss. Beside her, Dana stared at a clipboard but didn't see the words. She saw doors unopened and unknocked. In that sterile, too-bright room, a new silence began. A silence of waiting, of fragile hope, stitched together with thin thread. Noah turned his head slightly, just enough to suggest he had noticed the warmth on the other side of the glass. Ava inhaled sharply, her heart stumbling in her chest. For the first time since the door had opened, she believed there might be a way forward. At St. Augustine Medical Center, the first night passed like a long breath that wouldn't decide whether to stay or leave. Machines kept their metronome. Nurses moved like quiet sentences between rooms. Noah slept because the body sometimes knows more than the mind, and rest came to him as a kind of truce. Ava waited in the hum. She watched the small rise and fall under the hospital blanket and tried not to count seconds. The glass between them felt like a question. How close is care, when it has to look through a barrier? When he flinched in sleep, her palm found the pain, her body learning a new choreography giving warmth without touch. By morning, Dana arrived with paperwork she already hated. Her badge reflected the white light, a small mirror she did not want. She spoke softly with the charge nurse nodded in those careful ways that say, "I see you. I am responsible." Then stood apart, looking smaller than her job title. She carried a manila envelope, the kind that usually swallows things. Inside it, a plastic bag labeled Evidence held a stack of old postcards, elastic banded edges softened by years. To my boy, block letters. Travis's handwriting, the ink wavering where someone had paused. They were never mailed. Ava untied the band. The cards smelled faintly of dust and diesel, the perfume of distances. There were brief notes about blue highways, about a hawk pacing the sky over an Iowa field, about a truck stop that served pancakes all day. No grand declarations, just small proofs that love had once traveled this route. Noon brought social workers and a doctor whose voice left a room for hope to sit down. Trauma, they said, will keep time differently. Safety must teach it a new clock. Ava nodded, memorizing instructions the way she had once memorized lullabies as a teenager, helping Emily wash bottles at the preschool. Slow steps, soft voice, predictable light food that doesn't startle. When discharge came, it was quiet. Hospitals never trumpet the important releases. A nurse showed Ava how to cradle the weight of wires and memory without tangling either. Dana carried the envelope because the least she could do was not let paper be heavy in the wrong hands. The automatic doors opened with their indifferent sigh. Sunlight made a clean line across the floor. Noah winced, then blinked into it as if relearning the idea of day. Ava's apartment on Taylor Street had attempted to be ready. Blankets folded into soft piles, nightlight moon plugged into an outlet just above the baseboard, the air sweet with the memory of banana bread. On the kitchen table left there not for decoration but for promise a glass jar of river stones, smooth ovals to hold when breath needed company. The first hours were small. Water in a cup. A spoon against the rim without clatter. A bite of toast that didn't insist. Noah walked the perimeter of rooms like a wary cartographer mapping exits, practicing escape with his eyes first. He paused at the bookshelf spines of picture books Emily once used when Ava assisted her in Willow Creek's reading corner. His fingers traced a worn edge. Not choosing, just noticing. The afternoon brought weather to test a new place wind against the window, a neighbor's door closing too hard. When the knock came downstairs, someone dropping a package one floor below. It rose through the building like an old memory. Noah froze. The air changed shape. His shoulders lifted. His breath shortened, started counting too fast. Then, a second sound, the thud of a palm against wood somewhere in the stairwell. Big and official. The way doors are told to open when they've learned not to. Noah backed into the corner, slid down the wall, and folded himself into the old geometry, knees up, head tucked, hands to ears. His body had rehearsed this for months. It performed without asking. Ava moved slowly, dropped to the floor 2 arm lengths away. She didn't touch him. She let the room cool. She let her voice be a place rather than a command. Soft words without verbs. Here. Warm. Safe. The nightlight's plastic moon was out of place in daylight, and yet it glowed anyway, some small trick of reflection. Noah rocked, breath stuttering. The world tilted toward the old hallway in Cedar Ridge. Dana arrived on that storm of sound. She had come to bring groceries and leave guilt on the porch and found them like that, the boy compacted by terror, Ava making a shelter out of distance. Dana did not speak his name. She crouched at the threshold and set the manila envelope down as if placing a fragile animal in good grass. For a time, there were only 3 kinds of breathing in the room, fast, steady, held. Slowly, Ava's steadiness coaxed Noah's speed, asked it to match. He unwound a little. Fingers left ears. Eyes flicked to the envelope as if paper could be weather. Ava tipped it not toward him, but into light. Postcards fanned across the rug, deserts and mountains, and a city skyline inked with a trucker's handwriting that did not know how to say goodbye, only to. Her voice didn't tell a story so much as invite one to return. "Your dad wrote these," she murmured into the air, "because sometimes a child needs you to talk to the room, not to them. He meant to send them. He didn't stop loving you, he just got lost. Adults get lost in ways kids shouldn't have to witness." Noah reached without meaning to ran a fingertip along the corrugated edge of Arizona and the soft stamp of a cornfield sky. The wind at the window sighed. The building quieter now. His breath followed it down. When his voice came, it was a dry leaf turning. I thought, if I was good. Mom would come back. A sentence found Ava's ribs and took a chair there. Tears did the simple work they are made to do, which is to mark the place where pain has spoken plainly. She did not explain death or absolution. She placed one river stone in his palm, then placed her own palm open on the floor between them, close enough to mean with far enough to mean choose. He set the stone in her hand, unsure why hand to hand felt like the correct direction for weight. That night, the panic did not return. Exhaustion did. He slept the way survivors sometimes do, hard, then shallow, then hard again. Ava watched from a chair that learned her shape. In the early dark, she stood in the hallway outside his door and knocked once gentle 3 knuckles, tapping the idea into wood. Not to wake him, to promise. Emily's letter had said there would always be someone brave enough to knock. Ava let the house know she intended to keep hours. Days learned a new grammar. Morning meant oatmeal and sunlight. Afternoon meant a walk where sidewalks kept their promises. The park came slowly, then all at once a Saturday with cautious blue above it swings that creaked children who knew how to laugh without permission. Noah didn't run. He watched first, measuring distance the way gravity negotiates with a body. A little boy with a dandelion crown wandered over, offered a crumpled yellow flower without ceremony. Noah looked at Ava. She nodded, as if nodding were the safest word. He took it. The crown became a bracelet, then a seed evicting itself from his sleeve, floating away as if to check the sky for kindness. Music returned like a shy animal. A tune Emily used to hum, the one about a river turning and a moon that didn't mind, threaded the room when Ava washed dishes. She didn't sing at him. She sang near him the way you would place a warm cup near cold hands. One evening he hummed the tail end of a phrase, almost not at all. She stopped, not to draw attention, but to let the sound be the only event. The last note hung between them like a small bridge that remembered how to hold. The spoon found its new job. Ava had placed a clean white plastic spoon on Noah's nightstand, a moon that belonged to now, not to the floor in a different apartment. He picked it up, balanced it across 2 stones. He didn't say why. He did not have to. Some memorials are made of present tense. On a Wednesday that looked like any other, Dana returned without a clipboard. She carried groceries and something harder to carry, a promise made to herself out loud. She told her supervisor she wanted a smaller caseload and a louder voice. She discovered both did not fit easily in the same room, and still she tried. She knocked on Ava's door the way she wanted other people to knock on the next 3B. Ava opened. They stood with the odd intimacy of women who have held the same emergency from different ends. Dana apologized without words. Ava forgave without ceremony. Noah showed her a postcard with a hawk. Dana did not cry until she got back to her car. Even endings, the real kind, never quite end. They loosen. They lighten at the corners. On the last page of Emily's letter, the ink had thinned where tears or rain had visited. Ava read the words again that night beside Noah's door. There will always be someone looking for you, someone brave enough to knock. Trust that love doesn't disappear even if people do. She knocked once. "I'm here," she whispered to the wood. The moon nightlight threw a pale semicircle across the floor, a small harbor for feet learning to walk toward things instead of away. If stories like this feel like a map you might need someday, if you want to remember how to be the one who notices the one who knocks, subscribe. Stay with the quiet. Let it teach you where to stand. On Taylor Street, the evening arranged itself into something almost like peace. Through the window, the city kept its honest noises. Ava gathered the postcards into a box the size of a shoebox and set it where a child could reach. Noah fell asleep with one hand around a river stone and the other on the white spoon, not to hold the past in place, but to anchor the present. Far across town, Cedar Ridge Apartments breathed the slow breath of an old building. A single third-floor window reflected a streetlight, then went dark. On another block entirely, another hallway wore the same paint, and behind another door a shape moved past a curtain. It might have been nothing. It might have been everything. How many other kids are still waiting for someone to knock? Ava asked the room, not expecting an answer and getting the only one rooms can give quiet that agrees. The story did not end. It learned how to continue without breaking. Sometimes the gate is not iron or steel, but fear. Sometimes the key is a hand or a spoon or a postcard with a hawk and 4 words written in a trucker's careful block letters, "To my boy."